Oh yeah, I'm back in the chair, and today I want to talk about like the 7 major companies that make smartphone SoCs for smartphones, or basically SoCs for smartphones. Yeah, we call them SoCs when we talk about smartphones. I know lots of people like to say processor, but processor is actually like too generalized. When you talk about smartphones, you use a specific type of data processing tool, and those are called SoCs. So there are 7 major companies or 7 major brands that make SoCs for smartphones. Can you guess which ones they are? Let's jump into the video right away. Alright, now so in this video we're going to be dividing the SoC makers, or the SoC brands, or the companies that make smartphone SoCs into 2 distinct groups. Now the first group are the ones that make and sell SoCs for others. We call them chipset vendors mostly, and then the second group are the guys that make it for themselves exclusively. So now let's go to the first group. Now the first group consists of companies like Snapdragon, Qualcomm Snapdragon, MediaTek, and Unisoc. Now these 3 companies make and sell SoCs for others. They don't use it themselves. They don't have their own smartphone brands. I mean, Qualcomm, they tried. They released the Snapdragon for insiders. ASUS helped them make that phone, but they don't really have a phone brand, so that doesn't really count. So the first company I would like to look at is MediaTek. Now MediaTek have an ARM IP license, so they just get their chipsets straight from ARM. They get the designs straight from ARM. That's the CPU cores. They get GPUs from ARM as well, and then put everything together. They don't really spend a lot of money on R&D, since they already get it from ARM. Why do they have to like stress themselves? Then they also do not really do a lot of open source work with developers. They don't really do a lot of optimization. I mean, yes, they have the Hypertech engine, which they say optimizes their chipsets for gaming, but we've seen that in the past that it doesn't always work like that. You have to work with the software developers, which for the most part they aren't really ready to do yet. So that one could be a bit of an issue. So with MediaTek, you get lots of CPU power, usually hidden behind an optimization wall. It doesn't really mean that MediaTek SoCs aren't really powerful. They are, but not in all tasks. Like, that's where the issue is. So you get lots of CPU power, and MediaTek heavily focuses on CPU power. But while they're like really so focused on CPU power, they tend to leave other parts of the SoC untouched or undercared for, like image processing, for example, for photography or videography. MediaTek SoCs aren't like top notch when it comes to like that aspect. So their SoCs aren't really like well rounded. So it's mostly skewed. You get lots of CPU power, and then the rest are just meh and all that. So when you talk about like their lineup of processors, MediaTek has got the Helio A series, the Helio P series, the Helio G series, and the Dimensity. There's 2 others. There's the Helio X series and what other one? The Helio X series and the MediaTek series as the MT6 asterisk. But both of them have been discontinued now. They don't use them anymore. So whenever you hear anything in Helio A series, they're basically talking about entry-level processors. Helio G series could be between the budget and upper mid-range. They are mostly G gaming, at least they are sometimes usually overclocked for gaming, but not in all cases. The Helio G35 and G25 are budget and entry-level processors. Which siren is that now? You've got the Helio P series as well, budget to mid-range. Then Dimensity is like for the higher end, that's like from the upper mid-range all the way up to the flagships. Next up, you've got Snapdragon by Qualcomm. Now these guys they are the most well-rounded in the Android world so far as I can tell. They have the most well-rounded chipsets in the Android world. Now they have both an IP license and an architecture license from ARM, which means that they make custom cores, and they also use IP cores as well. But they really do a lot of work on their custom cores, so they spend lots of money on R&D, and on top of that they work very much with very well as well with software developers to make sure that games run better on their processors and their Adreno GPU, which is entirely made in-house too by themselves. And so therefore, like they've got lots of power. Like they focus on CPU power, not as much as MediaTek does, but they also like have a fair focus on CPU power, and they've also got like great GPUs, and they do not leave other parts of the SoC high and dry. No, they've got great ISPs for photography. They've got good network speeds. They do well with connection. That's the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, and LTE speeds, uplink and downlink. So like they're very, very well rounded. Now there is a downside to all of these. Is it really a downside? Yes, for those people like me who don't have money, it's a bit of a downside. Yeah, because you see all that research and development, that's R&D that goes into building their own custom cores, doing their own GPUs, pouring money into optimizing software for their processors. It means that the SoC is not going to come cheap. That's why you see that most smartphone makers usually elect to go with MediaTek most of the time over Snapdragon. If they get a Snapdragon chipset, they tend to paint the phone as, oh, this phone is very premium and so nice, so therefore the price is going to go up, because Snapdragon SoCs do not come cheap. Not at all. So therefore, since the SoC doesn't really come cheap, it means that the price of the phone is going to go up a bit. But with MediaTek, MediaTek SoCs are like very, very affordable. So you see, like they use them in in other phones that do not cost as much. So with Snapdragon, I think they've got 4 series presently. It used to be 5. The 200 series has been discontinued. So we really shouldn't really look at that. So you've got the 400 series, the 600 series, 700, and 800. So the 400 series is basically lower end, budget class, entry level. The 600 series is mid range, right? Like mostly lower and upper mid range, like 695 and 675 can be considered, I think 690 as well. Then 700 is basically upper mid range, and somewhere into the flagship killer segment. The 800 is exclusively flagship. The last of them is Unisoc. Now Unisoc, there's really not a lot to be said about Unisoc really, because up until recently they focused mostly on the entry level segment. That was their business model, that was all they did, but it got them bad rep. And I think their owners, the Xinhua Uni Group, decide, we've got to take things higher, and so they've gone up into the mid-range market, which I'm very happy to see. Now, anything you see Unisoc with an SC at the front, you really want to avoid those. You really seriously, you want to avoid those. The Tiger series, which are the mid-range ones, as you can see, maybe T606, T618, T6710, T7510, like those ones, they are really good mid-range chipsets. But just like MediaTek, they have an optimization problem as well. Is it really a problem? Like, I wouldn't call it a problem, because they handle some tasks very well, but not all tasks, because apps behave differently. That's where the optimization comes in. That's making your SoC or making the software run smoother, or to take advantage of the power of SoCs. That's that. So with Unisoc, they're cheap. They're way cheaper than MediaTek SoCs, but lots of people really don't use them because of the bad rep and the lack of optimization and several other factors. So that's for that. And now, so let's get into the realm of the guys who make SoCs exclusively for themselves. Now, some of us may be wondering quite a little bit that why is it that some people make SoCs for others to like buy, and then some people make it exclusively for themselves? Well, there are several reasons. Now let's look at a classic case of Google. Now Google used to use Snapdragon SoCs for their Pixel phones, but Google has always been AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning focused, and they also love photography as well. They're not really big on CPU power and all that, so they mostly have their own ISP, and they mostly have their own vision of what they want their phones to do, and how the processor, the SoC that powers it, should make the phone act. Now obviously you don't expect Snapdragon to modify their entire philosophy just to please Google. So that's why Google had to branch out and make their own SoC. It's called the Google Tensor. Now Google Tensor has a lot of power, like seriously, there's a lot of power on that SoC, but it is not geared towards like CPU functions. It is geared towards artificial intelligence and machine learning, because I see people like, but there are 2 Cortex X2s on that. I actually did make a video about it. There are 2 Cortex X2s on that SoC, and I'm like, yeah, but it's mostly focused on artificial intelligence and machine learning, not really like CPU tasks like that much. I mean, the CPU is powerful, but then again, you have to know where these people focus their priorities on. So you've got Google Tensor. That's like the only SoC made by Google for their Pixel phones. I think the Pixel 6 lineup, the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro. Next up, you've got Samsung's Exynos. Now Exynos used to be a big shot back in the day. They even had their own custom cores called Mongoose, I think M1 to M5. The Mongoose, the Meerkat, the Cheetah, and the Lion, and M6 never made it to market. They closed their custom core division and they went back to using ARM cores. Now Exynos SoCs are also quite optimized, not as much as Snapdragon, but they are quite optimized. The issue with them is that they can be inefficient sometimes, and for a company that wants to like produce the best SoC in the Android world, they tend to lag behind Snapdragon chipsets. That's why everybody who wants to buy Samsung flagships, for example, they're always like pulling the ear, like make sure you're getting the Snapdragon variant. If everybody gets the Snapdragon variant, who's going to buy the Exynos variant? Well, I guess maybe Samsung could just pull it out of the market then, but not really. They've not really had it good in recent years, but that doesn't mean the Exynos is a bad chipset. It's just that people who buy those need to lower the expectations a bit, right? So after we've done Google Tensor, we've done Exynos. Kirin is also, it's not that much different from the Exynos, but like just like Google, they don't really care that much about CPU power as well. Usually they tend to be like a generation behind when you talk about CPU power. For example, when everyone else was using Cortex A78 CPUs when they came out, Huawei and their Kirin, they were content to be with A77. They didn't really mind. When everybody moved up to Cortex X1, that was when they were like, okay, fine, let's take the step up to A78. So they were basically behind everyone else in terms of CPU power. But but they had like their SoCs were very good for photography. They were also like decently optimized and decently efficient as well. So if you're getting a Huawei phone, know that you're doing it for photography and not for CPU power. It doesn't mean that they're not powerful enough, they can't handle tasks. Yes, they can, but it's not really their focus. That's not really what they are all about. The last one on the list is Apple's Bionic, and I saved the best for last. So I don't know how many of you got them right? Snapdragon, MediaTek, Unisoc, Tensor, Exynos, Kirin, and Bionic. So these are like the 7 major companies. Now Apple have always stolen the match. In fact, they've stolen the match on everyone since 2013. 2014. I'm mixing up the dates now a bit, but they were the first company to have like a 64-bit SoC. Right? When you say 64-bit, we're talking about like the amount of data that an SoC can process at any given time. Now, why we are able to play like the high definition games that we do and watch the HDR video that we can watch today on our phones is because our processors have the ability to accommodate that stream of data, right? So that it can be able to accommodate that amount of data all at once, so that it can be able to process it and then like display it on your screen. Older processors, the older 32 bits, the older 16 bits, the older 8 bits, were unable to like handle that amount of data. It was just way too much for them to handle. So sometimes they first close the app or they crash. But Apple were the first to do it, like with their Swift CPU cores for the iPhone 5s, if I'm not mistaken. Now, ever since then, they have an ARM's architectural license, and ever since then they haven't really looked back. They have sat on top of Geekbench for years now, for a very long time, and nobody has come close to unseating them. Well, the gap it's closing, by the way. I think this year's Dimensity 9000 and Dimensity 9000 and Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 have given me a lot of hope that one day maybe they'll close the gap. I think what keeps Apple's Bionic ahead, it's the optimization, like everything. Like, I mean, Apple's Bionic is that kid, like that kid from a very good home, right? That they send to the best schools, they give the best tutors. Like the entire class is structured around them. Wow, I need to kill that chicken. The entire class is structured around them, to make sure that they succeed. Like if they get a teacher over, oh, for God's sake, I need to kill that. If they get a teacher over and like the teacher's, like teaching style doesn't work with the child, say, hey, get that, move out of the way. Why do most people consider Apple's Bionic to be the best? It's very simple. Everything around the Bionic is set up for Bionic to be successful, to succeed, to be the best. The software, the optimization, everything, the firmware, it's all designed for Bionic to like do really, really well. It's probably the most optimized SoC in the mobile market, the smartphone market, probably even way more than Qualcomm Snapdragon, because whatever it is, no matter what Snapdragon does, it still has to work with Android, and not just Android, it still has to work with like the different software skins, MIUI, One UI, whatever, from the different like phone manufacturers. Actually, that's the hassle that most Android, not just SoC makers who make SoCs for the Android market, have to deal with. So many components, a lot of which are sometimes incompatible with one another, sometimes barely compatible, and there's like so much parts that need to get in and be fixed, just to make sure they work properly. But with the iPhones, it's like an entire ecosystem on its own, and Apple makes sure that everything fits where they're supposed to be. So that's that. Those are like the 7 main companies and what to expect. With MediaTek, you get lots of power and almost nothing else. Unisoc, well, you basically I don't know, they're still working on it. I can't really say anything about them, but don't expect much from Unisoc, honestly. And if you see Unisoc SC's numbers attached, stay away from it. The Tiger, yeah, those ones are good. So the Tiger T series are like, they're okay if you're on a budget, they're fine. Qualcomm Snapdragon, well, basically depends on how much you want, but I think they'll deliver. 400 series, 600 series, 700 series, 800 series, they deliver. With the Exynos, well, they mostly only ever make it for their high-end flagships. So basically, if you get one, you probably know you're getting a good phone. Yeah, Kirin, I think the same thing that can be said about Exynos can be said about Kirin as well. But with the American ban, we probably won't be seeing any more like new SoCs from Kirin. So it's the old ones that I'm referring to. It's mostly their flagships mostly. I think those are the ones that you should be looking at, like their old flagships, if you probably want to get into like that sort of thing. With Bionic, well, it's flagship quality and you're going to pay through your nose just to get it. Doesn't mean that they don't have issues. Of course, every phone has issues. Every phone has bugs, Lubaski's law. I think some people tend to like treat their phones more than like just phones, and they treat it as some sort of status symbol. I don't know why people do that. It's just a phone. It's a tool for communication, and use your phone. Buy a phone that you can afford. Buy a processor that fits that fits what you think you want a phone for, because I think there's something out there for everyone. Just because, you know, like somebody uses a certain thing, then you want to force it on others that you've all got to use this thing as well because that's what's cool. No, honestly, I think there's like way too much pressure in tech groups in the phone market that you have to use a certain type of phone. Absolutely not. I've seen people who do nothing with their phones other than just make calls and, you know, like play Tetris or Candy Crush, you know, which is a modern Tetris, by the way, and they are being pressured to buy, I don't know, an iPhone 10, an iPhone 12. I mean, if it's something you like, yes, go for it. But they're like basic, lower mid-range budget class phones that you can buy at no cost, that will give you lots of battery power, and then you can be able to play your minor games that you like. You get, so there's like, everybody should know what they want. If you want to create videos with your phone, then you should know the type of device that you want to get. Like, everyone should stop following the bandwagon. You should know what's good for you. Because I think people message me sometimes and I did ask like phone A or phone B, which one? And I'm like, phone A can do processor, can do video, phone B can, you know, can do battery, can do network speed, and then they turn around and then they say, if it were you, which one would you pick? I am not you. I'm not saying this to shade anybody, because some of you who have asked me this question in the past may see this video. I'm not saying this to shade you. I'm just saying that I am not you. I like playing video games on my phone. I have a PlayStation 1 emulator, I have a PlayStation 2 emulator, I play PUBG, I play PES, right? I'm a heavy gamer, I make videos, I'm making this video with my phone right now. I am not you. So you should know what you want. So these are like all the different companies. If you're looking for a type of processor that fits your needs, I think you should be able to. I have written lots of stuff about this, but I'm not constraining you to go to my website. You can go to Wikipedia, you can go to different other blogs, different other websites, different other YouTube videos on how these processors behave and how you should know which one is the best for you. And I'm going to kill those chickens. I definitely am going to do so. I'm out of here.